You think loving me is about excitement, about ambition, about the future everyone sees. It's not. I'm not easy to love, not because I don't feel deeply, but because my mind never rests. Every night, while the world sleeps, I'm fighting storms no one applauds. Questions with no answers, pressure that doesn't switch off, a responsibility that follows me into silence. Loving me means understanding that sometimes I'm distant, not because I don't care, but because I'm carrying the weight of things I can't explain. It means knowing that my intensity isn't passion alone, it's survival, that my silence isn't absence, it's exhaustion. If you want to love me, you need to know this first. I don't need perfection. I don't need saving. I need someone who can stand beside the storm, not try to calm it, not run from it, just stay. I've never been easy to love, not because I lack emotion, but because my world never truly goes quiet. Even in moments of stillness, my mind is loud. Restless, always calculating what could fail, what must be fixed, what responsibility I can't afford to drop. People see ambition and mistake it for confidence. They see intensity and call it passion. But they don't see the nights when sleep feels like a luxury I haven't earned, when ideas collide with fears and the weight of decisions presses harder in the dark. That's the storm I live with. It didn't start with success. It started long before that, with the belief that if I didn't keep moving, everything would fall apart, that vigilance was survival at first. Later, it became identity. I learned early that results matter more than explanations, that people forgive distance if outcomes justify it. So I leaned into work, into purpose, into building things that demanded everything from me, because they gave me an excuse to give nothing else. Love, in that context, felt complicated. Messy, unpredictable. I watched relationships fracture under pressure. I saw how expectations turn into disappointments when reality refuses to cooperate. And quietly, I decided I wouldn't promise what I couldn't control. That decision protected me, but it also isolated me. When people tried to get close, they often misunderstood what they were stepping into. They expected availability, consistency, emotional ease. I offered honesty instead, and that wasn't always what they wanted. Because loving me means accepting that some nights my mind is elsewhere, not drifting, battling, running simulations of failure no one else will ever see, preparing for consequences that may never come, but must be anticipated anyway. It means understanding that when I go silent, it's not punishment or withdrawal. It's containment. It's me holding things together so they don't spill into places they shouldn't. I don't bring chaos into a relationship on purpose. But I can't turn off the systems that keep everything else running. There are moments when I want to explain this, to sit down and say, this is what it's like inside my head. But language fails, because how do you describe a storm to someone who's never stood in one? So instead, I simplify. I say I'm tired. I say I'm busy. I say everything's fine. And sometimes people hear that as distance rather than truth. I don't need someone to admire the storm. I don't need someone to romanticize it. I've seen how dangerous that can be, when intensity gets mistaken for depth, when exhaustion gets framed as dedication. What I need is someone who understands that the storm isn't the enemy, avoidance is. Someone who knows that loving me doesn't mean fixing my nights or calming my thoughts. It means trusting that I'll come back from them, that silence isn't disappearance, that focus isn't neglect. I'm not asking for unconditional patience. I'm asking for informed choice. To love me, you need to know that I carry responsibility differently, that when I commit fully, but not always loudly, that my loyalty is steady, even when my attention is divided. I don't fall in love easily, because love, to me, isn't an emotion you feel. It's a structure you build strong enough to survive pressure, and pressure is constant. If you want to love me, you have to understand that some nights I won't be soft, some mornings I'll be distant, some days my mind will be 3 steps ahead of my heart, but also know this, when I choose you, I'm not choosing comfort, I'm choosing trust. I'm choosing someone I believe can stand beside complexity without demanding simplicity. Someone who doesn't need me to be calm to feel secure. Someone who knows that depth isn't always gentle. I don't want a love that distracts me from the storm. I want one that understands why it exists. Because the storm didn't make me cold. It made me careful. And if you're still here after knowing all this, after understanding the nights, the silence, the wait, then maybe you're not trying to love an idea of me. Maybe you're choosing the reality. Once you understand the storm, the question changes. It's no longer, can I love you? It becomes, can I stay when loving you isn't simple? Because the truth is, the storm doesn't pause for romance. Deadlines don't soften because of emotions. Responsibility doesn't wait for reassurance. And my mind doesn't quiet down just because someone wants closeness. I live in a constant state of urgency, not panic, but pressure. The kind that sharpens you and slowly exhausts you at the same time. Every decision carries weight beyond the moment. Every mistake echoes farther than most people ever experience. That changes how I show up in love. I don't always respond quickly. I don't always express feelings in poetic ways. Sometimes my care looks like problem, solving instead of comfort. Sometimes my presence is practical when emotional warmth is expected. Not because I don't feel, but because feeling has never been allowed to slow me down. People often think loving me means being part of something exciting, a fast life, a powerful vision, a sense of importance. They don't realize that vision comes with mental isolation, that speed creates distance, that importance attracts expectations I never asked for. There are nights when the world feels loud even in silence. When my thoughts replay conversations, failures, risks over and over until rest feels irresponsible, I don't fear sleep. I fear missing something that could cost everything. That's the part few people are prepared for. To love me, you have to accept that sometimes I won't need words, I'll need space. Not distance born of disinterest, but space born of overload. And you have to trust that space doesn't mean abandonment. Trust is where most relationships with me struggle, because trust requires believing in what you don't see, and much of my life happens internally. I don't open easily, not because I want control, but because once something is spoken, it becomes real, shared, exposed. And exposure has consequences, so when I do speak, it's deliberate. If I tell you something about my fears, my doubts, my nights, it means I've decided you're safe enough to know them, that I believe you won't use my vulnerability as leverage, that you won't mistake honesty for weakness. That's rare, and when I sense impatience, the need for constant reassurance, emotional availability on demand, I retreat, not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. Because I cannot promise ease, I can only promise intention. I will show up. I will choose consistency over drama. I will protect what we build, even when I'm exhausted. But I won't perform love just to prove it exists. If you want to love me, you have to understand that my calm moments are earned, that when I relax around you, it's not coincidence, it's trust in action, that when I let you see me uncertain, I'm letting you into a place most people never enter. I don't need someone to absorb my storm. I need someone who doesn't take it personally, someone who knows that intensity doesn't cancel tenderness, that ambition doesn't eliminate affection, that silence doesn't mean distance of the heart. I love deeply, but privately, steadily, without spectacle, and that kind of love can feel invisible if you're looking for noise. What I offer isn't fantasy, it's partnership under pressure, it's loyalty when things aren't beautiful. It's choosing the same person even when life demands more than feelings can give. If you stay, you won't get a fairy tale, you'll get truth, you'll get growth, you'll get a life built intentionally, not impulsively. And yes, some days will be hard. Some nights will feel lonely even when we're together. Some conversations will require patience instead of passion. But if you can understand the storm, not fear it, not try to control it, you'll realize something important. The storm isn't chaos. It's responsibility carried at full weight. And when I let you stand beside me in it, it's because I believe you're strong enough to stay, not just when I'm easy to love, but when loving me requires understanding the nights I don't talk about. Staying doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments, small, unglamorous ones, where choice matters more than emotion. You begin to notice the patterns, the way my energy shifts late at night, how my silence has a rhythm, not random, not careless, but purposeful. You learn when to ask questions and when to simply sit beside me without needing answers. That awareness doesn't come from instruction. It comes from observation, from deciding to understand instead of personalize. Most people personalize the storm. They assume my distance is rejection, my focus is disinterest, my quiet is punishment. It isn't. It's containment. There are pressures I don't share because they're not meant to be shared, not out of secrecy, but responsibility. Leadership means absorbing impact so others don't have to. It means being the last place where uncertainty is allowed to exist. And when I come home, emotionally or physically, I don't always arrive light. You noticed that before I ever said it, you didn't accuse. You didn't demand softness on schedule. You adapted without erasing yourself. That's when I started trusting you. Trust, for me, isn't built through reassurance. It's built through consistency under strain. Through how someone behaves when I'm not at my best. You didn't compete with my work. You didn't ask me to choose between purpose and presence. You respected that both mattered and trusted that you mattered too. That trust disarmed me because I'm used to guarding against expectations, against the unspoken rules people bring into relationships. Be available, be expressive, be predictable. Rules I've never been able to follow without betraying who I am. With you, there were no rules, only communication. You asked honest questions. You accepted honest answers. And when those answers weren't comforting, you didn't punish me for them. That changed how I showed up. I started explaining instead of withdrawing. Not everything, but enough. I let you see the mechanics of my nights, the cycles of thought. The reason rest feels irresponsible when stakes are high. I didn't expect you to fix it. I just needed you to know it wasn't about you, and instead of reacting, you adjusted your expectations without shrinking your needs. You didn't disappear into patience. You didn't demand transformation. You stayed yourself. That balance is rare. It taught me something I hadn't fully understood before. Love doesn't mean absorbing someone else's chaos. It means standing close enough to it without losing your footing. I began noticing how your presence affected me, not by calming the storm, but by grounding it, by giving my mind a place to return to when everything else felt volatile. I didn't think about escape anymore. I thought about sustainability, about building a life that didn't require constant endurance, about letting someone witness the process, not just the outcomes. There were still hard moments, times when my intensity overflowed. When stress made me sharp instead of soft, when I struggled to articulate what was happening inside me, but instead of escalation there was repair. You didn't keep score. You didn't wait for perfection before staying engaged. You allowed growth to be imperfect and ongoing. That's when I realized loving me isn't about surviving the storm. It's about understanding its seasons, knowing when it will pass, knowing when it will return, and knowing that neither defines the entire sky. I stopped fearing that my complexity would eventually push you away. Because you weren't staying out of obligation or hope, you were staying out of clarity. You knew what you were choosing, and that made me choose you more deliberately. I stopped seeing love as a liability that required constant management. I started seeing it as a structure, something that could hold weight without collapsing, something built with intention, not impulse. I let myself lean, not fully, not recklessly, but enough to share momentum, enough to imagine partnership as strength rather than compromise, and for the first time, the storm didn't feel like something I had to face alone. Not because it disappeared, but because someone understood it well enough not to be afraid. When you love someone like me, you don't love the calm moments more than the difficult ones. You love the whole system, the drive, the doubt, the silence, the intensity. And if you can do that, without trying to simplify me, without trying to save me, then staying stops being a test. It becomes a decision made daily, with open eyes and steady hands. By the time you truly understand the storm, something else becomes clear. It isn't something to conquer. It's something to live with. I stopped believing that love should make life lighter in every moment, that myth ruins good relationships. Real love doesn't erase weight. It teaches you how to carry it together without breaking. With you, I didn't feel the need to explain myself constantly. That alone changed the dynamic, because explanation implies defense, and defense implies fear of being misunderstood. You didn't fear my intensity. You respected it. You understood that the same force that keeps me awake at night is the force that builds, protects, and refuses to quit when others walk away. The storm isn't chaos, it's responsibility at full volume. And responsibility doesn't switch off for romance. I realized that loving me means accepting contradiction, that I can be deeply committed and emotionally distant in the same hour, that I can care intensely and still need silence, that my loyalty is quiet, consistent, and not always expressive. You didn't demand a version of me that didn't exist. You chose the one that does. That choice mattered more than reassurance ever could. I began letting you into decision, making not just outcomes but process, the uncertainty, the hesitation, the moments where logic and instinct argue long after midnight. That's where trust lives, not in confidence, but in shared uncertainty. I noticed how you didn't measure love by frequency of messages or constant presence. You measured it by follow-through, by reliability, by whether I came back the same person, grounded, honest, unchanged in intention. And I did, because when I commit, I don't drift, I don't disappear, I don't keep options open, I anchor. You also didn't lose yourself trying to hold me steady. You kept your boundaries, your rhythm. Your voice that showed me something important. You weren't staying because you needed me. You were staying because you chose me. Choice is everything. I stopped seeing love as something fragile that required constant protection. I saw it as something resilient, capable of absorbing pressure without deforming. We didn't avoid hard conversations. We didn't dramatize them either. We addressed tension with clarity instead of accusation. That's rare, especially with someone like me, whose default mode is analysis, not emotion. You didn't ask me to be softer than I am. You asked me to be clearer, and clarity I can do. I learned that being loved doesn't require me to slow my mind, only to share where it's going. That being understood doesn't mean being decoded. It means being accepted without reduction. The storm didn't disappear, but it stopped feeling like a barrier. It became context, something you understood well enough not to compete with, something I trusted you enough not to hide. I no longer felt torn between intensity and intimacy, because intimacy didn't demand that I abandon intensity, it respected it. That's when I understood the difference between people who admire the storm and people who can live beside it. Admiration fades when things get difficult. Understanding deepens, and you understood. You didn't try to calm me when I needed focus. You didn't push closeness when I needed space. You didn't withdraw when silence arrived. You stayed consistent, not loud, not dramatic, just present. That consistency changed how I think about forever. Forever isn't built on passion. It's built on compatibility under pressure, on choosing the same person when conditions aren't ideal, on trusting that distance doesn't equal disconnection, on knowing that love can be quiet and still unbreakable. If you want to love me, this is what it requires, not sacrifice of self, not endurance without understanding, but awareness, boundaries, and intention. The storm will always be part of me, not because I'm broken, but because I carry responsibility most people never touch. And if you can stand beside that, not trying to stop it, not trying to escape it, then you're not loving me despite the storm. You're loving me with your eyes open, and that kind of love doesn't burn out, it holds. Loving me was never meant to be easy, it was meant to be honest. The storm you came to understand isn't chaos, and it isn't darkness. It's the weight of responsibility, the cost of vision, the pressure of carrying outcomes that don't pause for emotions. I didn't need someone to rescue me from it. I needed someone who wouldn't be afraid of it. You didn't try to quiet my nights or simplify my mind. You chose to understand the rhythm of it. You learned when to speak, when to wait, and when presence mattered more than words. That choice changed everything. I spent years believing love had to be soft to be real. I was wrong. Real love is steady. It holds shape under pressure. It doesn't demand I become someone else to be worthy of staying. You didn't love the calm moments more than the difficult ones. You accepted the full system, the drive, the silence, the intensity, and the loyalty that comes with it. And in doing so, you gave me something rare, space to be fully myself without defense. The storm never left. It never will, but it no longer feels isolating, not because it disappeared, but because it's understood. If you want to love someone like me, this is the truth. Love won't always be warm, expressive, or easy. Sometimes it will be quiet. Sometimes it will require patience instead of passion. Sometimes it will look like trust instead of reassurance, but it will be real. You didn't stay because you had to. You stayed because you knew what you were choosing. And that's why this love lasts, not despite the storm, but because it was seen clearly and accepted anyway. That's not romance, that's commitment.